Welcome back for part two on business leadership for CMOs. Let's get back to it. Right, sometimes we see huge organizations where the CEO also is CMO, right? We're not talking about small startups where there's a million senior level titles and you get a senior letter and you get a whole bunch of senior level
Yeah,
titles. Okay. If is this advisable? Is this ideal? If the CEO brain should be the CMO brain, is that or do we need some church and state separation?
I I'm thinking of this in a couple cases, and what I would say is there's a little bit of human nature happening here. If somebody was the CFO and they were moved up to CEO, it's so hard not to sort of bring that financial lens to your CEO role, right? If you're the CMO, and then you get promoted to the corner office, you're the CEO. It's so hard not to bring that CMO lens to it. I think one of the challenges, though, is this. For those CEOs who did have super, like excellent performance at the CMO, CFO, any of these C-level roles, um, the only way that you're going to be able to do that job of CEO fully is if you also let somebody else take over, truly take over from the role that you had before. So if you had a CMO, but you're still trying to do the CMO job as a CEO, you're probably not going to have that CMO for very long. They'll feel unempowered, they're going to quit, okay, or unempowered or second guess, etc. On the other hand, it could be the most amazing coaching relationship, right? And mentorship relationship that you actually have with that new CMO if you're now the CEO, right? I think where sometimes CEOs find themselves in trouble is when they start to think that it's so hard to find somebody to be that CMO when I was just did such a good job when I was a CMO. And you know what? I probably, because I'm so capable, I could do the CEO job and CMO job at the same time. Yes, I'll take one for the team and I'll do both, right? And the sad part about it is these performers can actually do them both, right? They can. But I would challenge and ask the question, are both jobs being done to the level that is possible if we did find somebody to actually have that CMO role and you only were doing CEO? Would you be able to do more deals in the marketplace? Would you be able to spend more time strategically working with the board and others? Okay, or be able to fully lean into that external role that's so important as a CEO, right? Does it send a message, an interesting message to people that says, hey, we can promote from within if that's where the new CMO comes from, right? Or on the other hand, recruiting an experienced CMO to do that particular job, does that bring in much needed new thinking, particularly if your organization is growing significantly, right? And so I think that it happens, right? It happens. And for those superstar performers who can do both, I'd say you're a star. There's just no other way to say it. But I'd also say that maybe your next area of growth CEO is to actually really lean into that CEO role and to let go of this vine, yeah, to catch this vine and let somebody else run with that. So every organization is different. Okay, I know we've seen this in places with some of our clients, Rania, but every organization, and by the way, every board who that CEO reports to has reasons for doing what they're doing, which we wouldn't ever know of, right? So very difficult question if you're the CEO and you're also doing the CFO role, or you're also doing the CMO role or whatever. But
We're gonna we're gonna take this and keep running with it. Okay, so the CEO can also be CMO. The brain can is doing two jobs. Okay, right now the trend in this gig economy are fractional roles. Is a fractional CMO enough? Can marketing be done part-time?
the answer is yes, sometimes. And the reason why I've got a little asterisk there is that let's wind back to an entrepreneurial leader, okay, who's been wildly successful, right? And they need to get the organization to the next level. There's complexity now. They need somebody who's got the CMO skills. And frankly, for the skills that they need, they cannot afford to have somebody full time. And by the way, if they did have the money for it, that person might not have the resources to do what's necessary. They may also not have the um, desire to actually just do that one thing, right? So in this particular case, it's a question of saying, well, if we've got a fractional CMO who's here 2 days a week, who's here 3 days a week, who's here whatever it happens to be, they're full time. But what they might be able to do in 2 days, 3 days a week might be significantly more of that marketing leadership role than, say, the CEO, that entrepreneurial leader could have done by themselves. And as the organization grows, maybe that 2 days becomes 3 days, becomes 4 days, right? Maybe at a certain point it becomes full time, right? Very often people who are fractional anything really love that fractional life where they're sort of splitting their time between different organizations because just that's the way they like it. And so sometimes at that point you might say, gee, we're grown out of the fractional CMO. They're not interested in coming working exclusively for us. We're going to recruit somebody at that next level, right? And so it's a great bridging strategy as an organization grows. Same thing with chief people officers or uh, chief financial officers or any particular role. It's a great strategy. But you grow out of a strategy, you've got to make a change.
I want to ask about, you talked about the career paths for CMOs, which we can go more on. But let's talk about professional development for senior marketing leaders or aspiring senior marketing leaders. Your CFOs, your accountants, they have to get their, professional development hours to keep their, their certification. Same thing with HR people. They have, education they have to get. But for marketers, there isn't anything mandatory that has to happen. So like, what are your suggestions for your ambitious CMOs?
It's very, very clear. You're either learning or you're forgetting. And so the only question that I would really ask is, what are the streams of learning that you're actually doing? During your day job, there's a lot of learning there in marketing. There's all kinds of new stuff. You get creative energy from all the interactions you have. If you're looking at numbers, you sort of get that logical kind of thing, but that's just on the job. Okay. But where are you getting the new ideas from? Where are you getting that sort of chance to sort of bounce ideas back and forth? There's so much stuff. And my charge to CMO is to say, um, put together your own professional development plan. Where are you going to spend 40, 80 hours over the next year investing in yourself as a leader, right? Some people say, well, I'll find this particular marketing, um, you know, certification, I'll get that. Okay, fine. You can do that. There's a lot of those. Another way is to say, well, you know what, I'm going to attend such and such a conference, and that way kind of learn from my peers. And there's a couple of people presenting. Oftentimes they're vendors trying to sell you stuff, but still you'll learn. And I think that's another stream that's actually quite useful. I think a third is to say, well, gee, maybe I should have an executive coach. By the way, we do that kind of thing, right? And that way you'll have somebody who can push you on some of your ideas or give some perspective or help you flesh out ideas, not just as you as a better and better marketer, but you as a better and better leader. Because there's this question of how much are you a marketer or are you a C-suite leader? And making sure that you've got the professional development for both of them is the way you sort of move up in terms of your effectiveness as both, right? Another thing is what's actually taking place at your leadership retreat every year. Is it something that is you're going through a bunch of goofy exercises? How does that make you a better CMO? How does that make you specifically more likely to successfully achieve your annual objectives or your group to achieve the numbers that you've committed to up-level you in terms of your leadership effectiveness, right? So how do you make sure that the retreats that you go to are ones that are actually effective? Okay, we've got ideas on that too. There's another one of these leadership Q&As where we explore that topic, right? But there's all these different paths. But one more thing I would add is that for the CMO to be the most effective CMO, you've got to be modeling the behavior of an effective CMO. And if you're modeling that behavior, what does that mean? It means that you're modeling two things: marketing excellence, creativity, analytical, understanding the tech, understanding the soft stuff, right? And leadership excellence, because you're on the C-suite, right? You're the chief marketing officer, right? And I think that for you to actually say to yourself, what am I doing to model this? Am I modeling, a director of marketing role several levels down? Am I modeling what? Because everyone around you will take a page from that and say, okay, this is what it means to be successful. This is how we get ahead in marketing. This is how we be successful marketers, to be doing what that chief is doing, right? I've got one other idea as well. And in another one of these sessions, we talked about peer mastermind groups. And I've the idea of saying, okay, if we had four or five other CMOs and a facilitator probing everybody, okay, what would that conversation look like? And our viewers can watch the entire thing on peer masterminds, but the uh, the idea here is the answer is likely in the room, right? It could very well be that somebody else has successfully addressed a challenge that you have, or perhaps there's something that you're doing that is like fantastic that perhaps other people can, especially because stuff is happening so quickly. So that's also something else that you as a CMO should consider. Ronnie, is there anything else you can think about that might help CMO answer that question?
I have a thought to add.
Please.
Um, I remember when I first joined here at the Brain Trust to work with Randall Craig, and on our first meeting, you said to me, "We're going to meet every day. We'll see how long it goes for. But we're not meet every day, and you're going to pitch every day to me your ideas. You're going to poke around. You're going to have ideas, and I want you to pitch ideas for me." And I had never had a manager say, "We're going to meet every day, and you have to have new ideas every day." And it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant because I have to challenge myself, and if it's not coming from in here, I gotta get outputs and inputs, and it's really that expectation has created a lot of ideas.
So I think that was a very interesting insight. Okay. Because I said that to you. Okay. And as a result of that, some of the most amazing ideas that I would never have thought about, okay, suddenly came to fruition. Okay. Was that great modeling as a C-suite leader? Don't know. Okay. But I think it was.
But the
Right.
expectation that your brain is here to generate ideas and to make connections, that was really, really powerful. And I don't know that everyone has the brain to do that, to just generate ideas in the way that a CMO has to be a creative.
Yeah. I think there's a difference though in terms of you, okay, is that the ideas that you come up with, ultimately, the majority of them you're responsible for actually executing. And I think that is an incredible model for most CMOs. I mean, your title is COO, not CMO, but where you can't just be up in the clouds, up in the ether. Here's a whole bunch of ideas, folks, etc. But you also have to think about how you're going to land that plane and actually get it done, right? And I think that if you're able to sort of, as a CMO, sort of go from 30,000 feet down to landing, then back up again, then back down again, you'll see things from different perspectives, and that by itself will add some interesting dimension to it. So it's good.
Randall, I'll change the channel.
Please.
You have written quite a bit on the concept of, build, borrow, or buy. What these platforms, there's all kinds of social platforms, all kinds of SaaS tools, especially with AI now. I haven't heard you speak about this concept since, all this proliferation of generative AI. Do you have any commentary or change of views or recommendations from where you sit now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ronnie. Build, borrow, buy. I think one of the things that's fascinating about scaling any business, so moving from startup to scale up, is the question of how do you get that product market fit? And how do you iterate fast enough to track kind of what that initial hypothesis is and pivot into whatever that future is? And what you're able to do now with some of these tools is actually do that quite quickly. Eons ago, you'd have to build a data center, and then you get the servers in, and then you get the programmers and the DevOps and this and that. Nowadays, you could spin up almost anything from Amazon or any of the other cloud providers in like literally minutes, right? And then you could use all kinds of very cool low-code tools to sort of put something in place to test the market. And Google seems to be in perpetual beta for so many of their products, etc., because they're constantly iterating, as most of those platforms do. At one point, I said that, hey, if it's strategic, you got to be the landlord, not the tenant. You've got to build it so that that's yours. But I think that it's no longer a black or white thing anymore, right? If you're using one of these infrastructure players and you're spinning up your own instance of your own version of a large language model and then using your data and it's not connected to others, etc. Well, you're borrowing a whole bunch of capability. You're building your own layer on it. And it's built in such a way that you can iterate, right? There's more data coming in, there's more training, whatever it happens to be. And that's just an AI example, right? But I think that the question is really more about what are the decisions, or rather, the criteria for decisions often have to do with speed and tracking client and market demand, as opposed to being pure about doing it one way or another. Back in the olden days, it was very simple. Do you build it? Okay, or do you rent it? Right? And nowadays there's layers, right? So it suddenly becomes a question of, yeah, you could do it a whole bunch of different ways, but what's really strategic? Do we sort of lay off some of the strategy a little bit just to be a little bit more tactical and get to market faster? Well, if we do that, what does that, how are we actually building a moat around our product or service that makes it harder for other people to copy, higher switching costs for our clients? Like there's all these other issues here that speed and tracking product market fit we didn't really think about, even 5 years ago so much compared to now.
You mentioned early in the hour that for some CMOs, customer service falls in their portfolio. Now, marketing communication prior, we're reaching back not that far, but it feels that far, prior to the internet and all these things was done like all by phone. And then even 10 years ago, 99% of all customer care interactions were all done by email or phone. Now we see tens of thousands of interactions done on social media daily. And now with AI bots, people are, getting those AI bot communications, phone calls, customer service touch points, AI written emails. Do you have any like, do you want to share with us, broad strokes, what your recommendations to your clients would be? Like, is it yes, get on board, this is the future, pilot this, play with this, or is it people don't like this and it's too soon for this? What would you say?
I remember I had to change a flight on Expedia a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And they had an Expedia bot, and it said, how can I help you? I'm the bot. I said, I want to change my flight from here to there. Or I want to cancel the flight. I can't remember. And the response was, yes, I can handle that for you. What do you want to change? Blah, 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 blah. And the whole thing was just so pleasurable. Okay, it was so pleasurable. Other times, I want to actually speak to a real person because it's so hard to type in and peck exactly what the issue is. It's complex, right? And I'm talking about as a consumer, but I'm also talking about as a business leader, right? At this point, even with agentic AI where it is, it's people that sign contracts. It's not computers that sign contracts. So back to the customer service angle in your question. Um, there are platforms that allow the service to take place by email, web chat, okay, phone, etc., and one common database. And gee, that we can put a bot in front of it to sort of answer most of the questions. Or in the email, we can give some links to frequently asked questions or specific, knowledge-based questions that people have asked that are similar in the solutions. And that might be able to triage an awful lot of the human interaction. Okay, but I think the organizations that make the decision to only use these bots run the risk of doing two things. Number one, not building a relationship at a point where somebody's got a high degree of potential frustration, or they're avoiding, or they're missing out the opportunity to actually learn more about their clients, their customers, or their prospects, and perhaps fulfill them with the right product or service, right? There's no upsell capability. There's no cross-sell capability, in other words. There's no um, R&D with respect to what their actual needs are, right? And I think that for any CMO to say, okay, well, customer service is somebody else's responsibility, that's fine if that's the structure within your organization. But to my earlier point about making sure it's really wired together, if somebody's responsible for the product roadmap, if you're a SaaS company, for example, what's the connection between what you're doing as a CMO or what the CRO is doing if you don't have a CMO? And the feedback that you're getting. From a data and IT perspective, how can you use the interactions that are coming through these platforms as a way to build a better AI to do the service or to inform some of the product development, excuse me, or to decide, that maybe there needs to be several pathways support. I had the most interesting interaction with one of the big banks, a bank I've dealt with for years. I guess I'm in a higher tier of service than some people. And I was having a problem with my credit card and my web banking. So I called the number, and the voice said, type in your customer number or whatever it is. And they said, between your phone number, your customer number, we believe you're so and so. Your call is being routed to a priority agent to serve you directly. I thought, okay, looks like I'm not going to be giving an hour of my time waiting, listening to asinine music, right? But because they know who I was, I'm not anybody special. Okay, they routed me to the service quality, service level that was appropriate. Well, we can use data for that kind of thing, but not everybody, when they're putting in place some of the customer service, client service infrastructure, are really thinking that way. They should, okay, but that's the job of the CMO, is to say, listen, if service quality is a prime determinant of whether work is referred or more products are sold or whatever it happens to be, surely there needs to be a marketing lens, and there could be some marketing input that actually needs to take place. So it's a very roundabout way of answering the question, Rania.
I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll leave it to you for final words, Randall. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, we've talked in other sessions about, leadership efficiency and prioritization and, is the juice worth the squeeze and, the urgent versus the important dilemma we all deal with. What should the mantra be for CMOs? Like, what is the guiding principles? Like, what should keep grounding them? Because the role can be anything and everything, and it is everything and anything.
I think I think that's a great question. And what I would say is, if we were to just imagine that you were hired last week and today is your first job as a CMO, what would you do? Right? What would you look at? What would you say? I don't like that. That should change. Oh, there might be something underneath that rock over there we need to explore. What would you change? What would you do? Where's that innovation at the CMO level that you could bring in, right? If you were to sort of stop all of your agency relationships, all of your consulting relationships, all the partner relationships, and say, okay, who do I really want on my team, right? If you're to interview all of your other your peers, what would they say from their perspective are the things that are keeping them up at night? Now, of course, you've got your strategy and all the individual tactics and all the initiatives underneath, etc. but everyone, all your colleagues are looking at it through their lens. They're not looking at through yours. So I would say, hey, listen, challenge yourself to say, hey, um, if marketing truly is that dynamic, how do I make sure that I don't fall into this same as kind of zone? Because if you always willing to say, let's get to that next level. Let's get to that next level. Guess what? All of your people will move up to that next level too. All those people will take that modeling behavior that you're doing and saying, this is what it means to be successful as a professional marketing leader, right? And the organization will actually see that too. So that's probably what I would say. The other thing I'd say is you don't need to do it on your own, right? You've got all these partners, okay? You can get people like us as a coach, etc., right? You can start to say, how do I um, move beyond just my particular silo so that the work that we do truly amplifies, okay, in other groups of the organization and vice versa, right? I think there's a huge level of opportunity there, just a huge opportunity.
Randall, any final words or thoughts that you don't think we covered in the hour you want to talk about, or should we wrap up for the hour?
So w early in the call, we talked about AI. And it just struck me, as we've been going through the session, it just struck me that, well, what's an example of something that's innovative that you can do as a CMO that might be interesting to see what's going on? And here's the idea. Um, what if you used AI to create personas of all the different roles involved in the decision-making process? What if you did a bit of a journey map and say, what happens at every point on that journey, every single touch point, who's involved? And what if you started to use those personas in that journey map and use that as the machine that any particular marketing initiative that you're doing, any campaign, any layer of the stack, if you will, and say, based on this, how does that actually impact, right? Is trust going up? Is trust going down, right? Are we building more leads? Are we changing our brand one way or the other? Okay. What if you did that and then you interviewed the personas, each of the different personas, the market segments, and say, what's missing? Okay. What do we need to do more? Right? You can use AI, if you will, as a way to amplify. Now, I wouldn't believe everything it said, but it may uncover some ideas that you and your team can have some amazing conversations with that you might not have thought of otherwise. If you spend all that time building the AI personas and making a private GPT or a project, whichever platform you have, and that way you've got that co-pilot, pardon the pun, of saying, hey, listen, yeah, we're using this tool not just for workflow improvements, but here's an example of saying, hey, maybe we could do it very differently in the future.
Thank you, Randall, for the conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined us and listened in. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, if you're considering change and want our perspective, if you're planning a leadership retreat, an executive offsite, and want some help planning that or executing on that, do reach out. We're happy to have a conversation and share resources. If you want invites to these monthly sessions, you can email us at podcast@randallcraig.com. We look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn and seeing you next time.